Right now, in the state of Idaho, there is this very stark, uh, very physical contradiction playing out on the ground.
Yeah, contradiction is definitely the right word for it.
Right, because if you drive out into the backcountry and pitch a tent, you're celebrated. You're a rugged outdoorsman taking part in this beloved state pastime.
Absolutely. It's the whole culture there.
But if you park your car in one of Idaho's largest cities, turn off the engine, and just recline the seat to go to sleep because you literally have nowhere else to
So you
live.
suddenly become a massive liability.
Exactly. Resting in that parked car can now trigger a $10,000 state-mandated fine. And the wildest part is that the fine isn't levied against you, the person in the car.
Right.
It's levied against the city itself if the local police refuse to penalize you.
It is a massive legislative shift.
Yeah.
We're looking at a state-level system that effectively penalizes municipalities for showing any kind of leniency to their own vulnerable populations.
Well, it's just wild.
Completely upends how local communities are allowed to handle their own housing crises.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. Today, we are building the perfectly homeless state score for Idaho.
And this is a really fascinating state to evaluate.
It really is. We're going to evaluate the state across 6 specific categories. So, housing affordability, shelter access, criminalization and enforcement, vehicle dwelling friendliness, outreach and social services, and pathways to permanent housing.
Right, because the goal here isn't just to rattle off statistics.
No, not at all. It's to understand what daily survival actually looks like on the ground for an unhoused person in this state.
Exactly.
We will give you a preliminary draft score about a third of the way through, but the final official state score will only be awarded after all the evidence is weighed.
Sounds good.
But before we even get into the specific categories, I just have to ask, how did Idaho, the state that essentially wrote the modern legal playbook on homelessness rights, suddenly become one of the strictest, most punitive environments in the entire country?
Well, to understand how that happened, you first have to look at the sheer scale of the crisis and the geographic reality of Idaho.
Okay.
The narrative often gets lost in the numbers. For instance, if you look at the recent point-in-time count, it shows 2,411 individuals experiencing literal homelessness in the state.
Let's pause there for a second, because if you're joining us for this deep dive, you might not know what a point-in-time count actually is.
Right, it sounds very official.
Yeah, but it's basically exactly what it sounds like, right? It's volunteers going out on a single night in January with clipboards, just physically counting the people they can see on the street or in traditional shelters.
Exactly, it's just a snapshot.
Yeah.
And because it's just a visual snapshot on one cold night, that number, the 2,411, is deceptively small. It completely misses the invisible, unhoused population.
The people sleeping in cars, couch surfing, that sort of thing.
Right. To see the real picture, you have to look at the public school data tracked under the federal McKinney-Vento classification. Yeah, because schools track housing instability much more closely than city surveyors do. And according to that data, there are 8,180 homeless students in Idaho.
Wait, over 8,000 students?
Yes. And of those children, 664 are living completely unsheltered.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. That means they are sleeping in passenger cars, in vans, or in severely substandard conditions.
So the reality is vastly broader than what the official street count tells us. We're talking about thousands of families here.
We are, and they are spread out across the state with massive geographic disparities. So imagine a map of Idaho, right?
Okay.
In Region 7, which includes Ada County and the city of Boise, you have 592 shelter beds and an unsheltered rate of about 13.8%.
Okay, so it's tough, but there is some infrastructure there.
Right. Now, cross the border into Region 3, just next door in Canyon County, which includes the city of Nampa. In that region, there are 686 unsheltered individuals, but only 68 shelter beds.
Wait. 686 people and only 68 beds.
Yes. Do the math on that.
Yeah.
That results in a staggering 91% unsheltered rate.
That's insane.
And the major factor driving all of this across the entire state is a severe housing deficit.
Right.
The state currently lacks nearly 25,000 rental homes that are actually affordable to extremely low-income households. The wages just haven't kept up with the explosive population growth and rising rents.
So what you're seeing right now is just a violent clash between this very stark housing reality and sweeping new state legislation.
Exactly.
Well, let's look at how that clash actually plays out by diving into our first category, which is shelter access. You just laid out that massive regional disparity between Boise and Nampa.
Right.
If you think about it like a game of musical chairs, it's a completely rigged game depending on what room you're in.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like in the Boise room, you have 10 people and 9 chairs. It's tight, but almost everyone gets a seat. But in the Nampa room, right next door, you have 10 people and only 1 chair. But here is the critical part. When the music stops, the penalty for not having a chair is exactly the same in both rooms.
Yep.
The state doesn't care that the Nampa room didn't have enough chairs to begin with.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
I mean, for someone in Boise, the shelter beds might often be full, but new facilities are actively opening.
Right.
But for someone in Nampa, finding a legal shelter bed on any given night isn't just difficult, it is a mathematical impossibility. And because of that, this creates a major obstacle for people trying to regain stability in places like Canyon County.
But even in Boise, where they actually have beds, getting those facilities open is a brutal fight.
Oh, it's exhausting.
Yeah, look at the multi-year battle for the interfaith sanctuary. I mean, the Boise City Council had to reaffirm their permit for a new 24/7 low-barrier shelter on West State Street 3 separate times.
3 times.
Yeah. They had to fight through endless neighborhood lawsuits, taking it all the way to the Idaho Supreme Court before they could finally open their doors.
It's a grueling process.
Yeah.
But, the real-life impact of a city willing to fight that battle is transformative. We really need to explain why a 24/7 low-barrier shelter matters so much.
Definitely.
Traditional shelters often have incredibly strict rules. They might require you to be completely sober. They separate husbands and wives into different dorms. They don't allow pets.
And crucially, they force everyone to pack up their belongings and leave the property at 7 a.m. every single morning.
Exactly.
Right, so you're just pushed back out onto the street for 12 hours, carrying literally everything you own.
Yep.
How are you supposed to hold down a job or go to a doctor's appointment or, stabilize your mental health when your entire day is just about surviving until the shelter doors open again at night?
You can't. You just can't. That's why a 24/7 low-barrier shelter completely changes the game. It allows people to stay inside during the day. It keeps families together.
Right.
It lets people keep their pets, which, for many, is their only source of emotional support. Boise's relentless efforts to build these types of shelters, well, this helps offset challenges seen elsewhere in the state.
But this immediately begs a question. If NEMPA mathematically has almost 0 beds for these people, what exactly are the police supposed to do when they find someone sleeping outside?
Right.
Which brings us directly to our next category, criminalization and enforcement.
Yeah, and this is where we see that intense historical whiplash we mentioned earlier.
Okay, let's get into it.
To understand the current environment, we have to rewind to 2018. Boise was the origin of a famous Ninth Circuit Court ruling called Martin versus Boise.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, it was huge. Essentially, unhoused residents sued the city over its camping bans, and the court ruled that cities cannot criminalize sleeping outside on public property if there are no shelter beds available.
Okay.
It essentially said you cannot punish someone for the biological necessity of sleep if they have nowhere else to go.
It became the defining legal precedent for the entire West Coast. I mean, it forced cities to actually build shelters instead of just handing out tickets.
Exactly. It changed everything. But then, in 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling in a different case, Grants Pass versus Johnson, which completely overturned the Martin versus Boise precedent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they ruled that cities can enforce broad camping bans, regardless of whether shelter beds exist.
Wow.
And the moment that Supreme Court decision came down, the state of Idaho immediately passed Senate Bill 1141, commonly known as the Galloway Law.
And here is where the state just comes down with a hammer. Senate Bill 1141 outright bans public camping or sleeping in cities with populations over 100,000.
Right.
So we are talking about Boise, Meridian, and Nampa. And crucially, the state legislature wanted to ensure absolute compliance. They didn't trust local mayors or police chiefs to enforce it strictly enough.
Yeah, they really didn't.
So the law threatens to fine the cities themselves up to $10,000 per violation if local police fail to enforce the ban.
It completely removes all local discretion.
Right.
But, we are actually seeing local jurisdictions creatively fighting back to protect vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Boise, Police Chief Christopher Dennison put forward a plan to classify illegal camping as a $10 civil infraction rather than a criminal misdemeanor.
Which is a huge distinction. I mean, if you're listening to this deep dive, you might think, well, it's just a ticket either way.
Right, a ticket is a ticket.
But it's not. A misdemeanor gives you a permanent criminal record. If you get a criminal misdemeanor just for sleeping outside, that record will pop up on every background check for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
It will instantly ruin your chances of getting an apartment or being hired for a job. So Boise's move to make it a $10 civil fine preserves the officer's discretion and actually protects the unhoused person's future.
And what's fascinating is how universally concerning the broadness of this state law is. It even alarmed the conservative Idaho Freedom Foundation. Yeah, they looked at the text of Senate Bill 1141 and pointed out a glaring hypocrisy. The law explicitly exempts commercial truckers who need to pull over and sleep,
Of course.
but essentially bans a weary dad driving an RV or a family traveling cross-country from pulling over to rest on public roads.
Wow. So it aggressively targets a specific demographic while literally carving out protections for industry.
Exactly.
Because of this aggressive state preemption that actually punishes cities for trying to help people, this significantly weakens the overall picture for Idaho.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So taking into account what we've covered so far, the housing deficit, the shelter disparities, and this intense new criminalization, I think it's time to check in on our progress.
Right. It is time for the draft score moment.
Let's hear it.
So based on the intense criminalization mandated by the state, which is, only offset slightly by Boise's fierce local pushback to preserve shelter access and reduce penalties, the draft score is currently hovering in the low to mid-range.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We are looking at a system deeply in the red right now. But remember, this is preliminary. This score is going to shift as we continue our analysis and look at how people are actually surviving day to day, particularly those who have been forced into their vehicles.
Let's dive right into that with our next category, vehicle dwelling friendliness. As we established with the McKinney-Vento school data earlier, hundreds of families and students are living in passenger cars or vans.
Right.
For them, a vehicle is their last remaining asset. It is a lockable door. It is their only protection from the freezing Idaho winter. But Senate Bill 1141 explicitly includes motor vehicles and RVs in its definition of illegal camping.
And this leads to a mechanism in the system that absolutely blew my mind when I was reading through the research. It's a bureaucratic doom loop I call the DMV registration trap.
Oh, the registration trap is brutal.
Yeah, if you want to legally register a vehicle or renew your license plates in Idaho, the Department of Motor Vehicles requires you to provide a verifiable physical address. But if you are unhoused and living in your car is your address. You obviously cannot provide a physical residential address, which means legally you cannot renew your tags.
And the cascade of consequences from that one administrative rule is just devastating. Once your tags expire, you are driving an unlicensed vehicle.
Right.
City codes, like those in Nampa, or the strict overnight parking bans in Canyon County, mandate that unlicensed vehicles parked on public streets be immediately ticketed and towed.
So let's walk through what that actually looks like on the ground. You go to the DMV to do the right thing and update your tags.
Right, try to follow the rules.
You're turned away because you don't have an apartment, so you drive back to a dark street to go to sleep. And in the middle of the night, a tow truck hitches up your home and hauls it away to an impound lot.
Yeah.
And because you were homeless, you obviously cannot afford the hundreds of dollars in impound fees and daily storage fees. So what happens?
They sell it.
The towing company auctions off your vehicle. The state policy is literally stripping people of their shelter, their mobility, and their last remaining financial asset.
I have to push back here because the logic is completely broken.
It really is.
If a vehicle is the literal roof over a family's head, the only thing keeping a child off the actual concrete, why is the administrative system engineering a way to confiscate it?
Because the legal framework doesn't recognize the vehicle as a life-saving shelter. It sees an administrative nuisance.
Wow.
It sees a blight that needs to be cleared from the public right-of-way. When the system demands a physical address from someone who, by definition, does not have one, it creates a self-fulfilling cycle of displacement.
Right.
You are punished for being homeless by having the tools you need to escape homelessness taken away from you. Because of this trap, this creates a major obstacle for people trying to regain stability.
It's infuriating. But it does lead us to how the community is actually fighting back, which brings us to our next category, outreach and social services.
Yes, let's talk about that. Because Senate Bill 1141 and these strict parking bans generally apply to public land and public streets, communities are responding by leveraging private property.
And we are seeing incredible grassroots interventions stepping into the void left by the state. Look at an organization like ResourceLink Idaho and their Safe Nights Idaho program.
Right, they're doing amazing work.
They realized they couldn't park on the street, so they partnered directly with churches and local business owners to create legal overnight microsites in private parking lots.
Ooh, that's smart.
We're talking small setups, just 2 to 3 cars per lot. But they provide the guests with legal parking permits, portable toilets, hand washing stations, and mandatory housing case management.
There's also a program called Inspire Idaho, which specifically targets aged-out foster youth.
Yes, such an important demographic.
Definitely. They place these young adults in private accessory dwelling units, like backyard tiny homes, or in RVs hosted by vetted community members on their own private land. It completely bypasses the state's public camping bans.
It's deeply innovative, but we do have to acknowledge the real-life limitations here. Unlike publicly funded safe parking programs in neighboring states like Washington or Oregon.
Right, where they have huge lots.
Yeah, those often have large lots with security, hot showers, laundry machines, and communal kitchens. But Idaho's safe parking network is entirely volunteer-driven. It is privately funded by donations.
And there's another huge catch. Almost all of these private lots strictly exclude RVs. And that's not because the churches don't want them. It's because local zoning laws prohibit RVs from being used as dwellings, even on private commercial property.
Oh, the zoning laws are a nightmare.
Yeah. So the most visible vehicle dwellers, the families living in old RVs, are left entirely exposed to the state fines and towing.
Right.
Even so, when you look at the sheer dedication of these private citizens and faith groups who are personally bridging the gap left by the government, this becomes one of the state's strongest categories.
Absolutely. So finally, we have to look at how all of these elements impact someone's future in our last category, pathways to permanent housing.
Okay, bringing it all together.
We know about the 25,000 unit deficit.
Yeah.
But you have to connect that to the lived experience of trying to survive in this economy. There are countless stories shared in local forums.
Yeah, I read some of those.
Like one Reddit user who detailed surviving in their car for 9 months while working full-time. They pointed out that earning minimum wage or even working a decent survival job is fundamentally incompatible with the reality of urban Idaho rents.
Right. So what happens when you put all these pieces together? How does a person actually get out of homelessness in Idaho?
It's a catch-22.
The tragic answer is that the system interacts in a way that actively dismantles your pathway out. If you get a misdemeanor for sleeping outside because you were in a city that didn't adopt Boise's $10 civil fine model, that criminal record will get your rental applications immediately denied by landlords.
And if you try to live in your car to avoid sleeping on the sidewalk, you fall into the DMV registration trap. Your car gets impounded, which means you lose your transportation.
Right.
If you lose your transportation, you can't commute to that survival job. If you lose the job, you lose your income. The very enforcement mechanisms meant to police public space actively destroy the tools a person needs to secure permanent housing.
The legal barriers compound the economic barriers. You are trapped in a cycle you literally cannot earn your way out of. And because of that compounding effect, this significantly weakens the overall picture.
All right. We have weighed the evidence across all 6 categories. It is time for the final assessment.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's summarize exactly where the state of Idaho stands.
When you look at the major strengths, they lie almost entirely in the resilience of local advocates. It's the nonprofits, the faith groups, and the city administrators in places like Boise who are doing everything they can.
Absolutely.
They are creatively using civil infractions to avoid giving people criminal records. They are establishing private property safe parking networks, and they are fighting exhausting legal battles all the way to the Supreme Court just to open a shelter. They are fighting to protect the unhoused from severe state mandates.
But the major weaknesses are systemic, heavy, and codified into state law. You have aggressive state preemption under Senate Bill 1141 that literally fines cities for showing empathy or leniency.
Right.
You have massive shelter deserts in places like Canyon County where finding a bed is impossible. And you have that catastrophic DMV registration trap that legally strips people of their only remaining shelter and transportation.
So let's assign the final grades.
For housing affordability, Based on the nearly 25,000 unit deficit for extremely low-income renters and skyrocketing costs, it earns an F.
For shelter access, reflecting a completely split reality, with high marks for Boise's low barrier shelters, but failing marks for the mathematical impossibility in Nampa, we assign a C.
For criminalization and enforcement, based on the state-mandated $10,000 fines against cities and the sweeping, unavoidable camping bans, it is an F.
For vehicle dwelling friendliness, driven entirely by the bureaucratic doom loop of the DMV trap and aggressive towing laws that confiscate homes, it earns an F.
For outreach and social services, based on the incredibly strong, innovative, private, and faith-based interventions that are keeping people safe despite the laws, we assign a B.
And finally, for pathways to permanent housing, based on those compounding legal and transportation barriers that trap people in poverty, it is a D.
When you calculate those grades, a very clear narrative emerges. The overarching state legislative framework actively punishes survival. It effectively mandates displacement over actual housing solutions.
Which means it's time to reveal the final numerical score. The final perfectly homeless state score for Idaho is 34 out of 100.
That score is deeply earned. While Idaho boasts incredibly dedicated local advocates and innovative harm reduction strategies at the city level, the state apparatus fundamentally treats homelessness as a legal infraction to be penalized, rather than a housing crisis to be solved.
Before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Consider what actually happens when a state legally outlaws the symptom of a problem, like sleeping outside, without legally mandating a cure, like providing a physical address or a shelter bed. When the music stops and there are no chairs left, punishing the people who are left standing doesn't make the chairs magically appear. It just breaks the people. That's the Perfectly Homeless State score for Idaho. If you'd like to support the project, click on over to the Perfectly Homeless Etsy store and get yourself a warm hoodie with our logo. Or you can buy us a coffee at buymecoffee.com/perfectlyhomeless. Every purchase and donation helps fund future episodes in this 50-state journey through homelessness in America. Wear the logo. Start a conversation. Because homelessness isn't someone else's problem anymore. It's happening in every state, every city, and more neighborhoods than most people realize. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next episode.